Celtics Reddit podcast.
Back out to Smart. Fakes the pass all the time. Three. Bang! It's Williams screen. Lobs it up for Robert Williams.
Should he know? Jaylen Brown. What a thunder!
Tatum. Durant, the long reach. Tatum crossover, pull-up jumper. It's good. 50 points for Jason Tatum.
What is up? Welcome to the Celtics Reddit podcast. My name is Jake Issenberg, and I'm without my wingman today, so please bear with me as I try and guide this ship. But we are joined by a very special guest today. We're joined by Alex, the founder of Hawks Fan TV. Alex, how are you, mate?
I'm doing great, Jake. I appreciate you having me on.
Mate, no worries at all. We were just chatting off mic, hearing how there's a lot of Aussie Hawks fans as well, and how it's definitely a global game, and especially Aussies loving their hoops. So it's good to hear you've got some Aussies in the Hawks corner as well.
Absolutely, yeah. We have a loyal, faithful group down there, so it's exciting to see.
Love it. So Spoonie and I teased this series last episode, but in case if any of the listeners missed it, this is the first episode in a series where we get on the experts of the rival Eastern Conference teams to give us an update on their offseason, the scouting report, how they stack up against the C's, because the thinking is that you're just never going to know how another team is going in depth as the fans and the people that cover those teams locally. As Celtics fans, we're watching every game, maybe even more than once, and we only see the Hawks a handful of times throughout the season. So we figured we'd get the experts on to run us through. So let's just kick off. We'll do a Hawks vibe check. I mean, they had the Eastern Conference Finals run the year previous with high expectations coming in last season. And then, I mean, you tell me, slightly disappointing season, I think, last year. What are the vibes coming out of the most recent season?
Yeah, so you hit the nail on the head, Jake. After that ECF run, obviously we took the East by storm, that playoff run, and a lot of people were expecting us to lose in the first round. And we made, 2 games away from an NBA Finals. The hill that I'm willing to die on, Jake, is, if Trae Young never got hurt in Game 4, I think we would have won that series. But hey, that's neither here nor there. But yeah, we had high hopes going into this next season, and it was definitely a disappointing season by all accounts. Simply not because we lost in the first round by the Heat, because kudos to the Heat, they're a great team. As you guys know, I mean, you guys went to Game 7 with them, but it's how the season started, and kind of just the roller coaster ride of, we would win some games, lose some games, and just hovering around that 500 mark for far too long. And, we had injuries, we had COVID and this and that, but, that's part of the game. And, falling into the play-in spot was definitely not where myself or a lot of Hawks fans had us set, but I think it was a good learning lesson for a lot of our younger guys, and I'm hoping this is a good experience for them to not take some of these regular season games lightly. So I have high hopes going to this next season. On paper, this is the best roster we've had in the Trae Young era, so a lot of high hopes.
I love it. I honestly, it's quite comparable, I feel, to the Celtics season 2 years ago, the year that you guys made the conference finals. A lot of injuries, a lot of COVID, hovering around that 500 mark. You get a little bit of momentum, you lose a few, you have too many games to count that you could put in the worst loss of the season bucket. And I think that those 2 seasons were quite comparable. And then you kind of reload in the off season. And I think you're right that this Hawks team on paper looks really good going into the next season. And we'll jump into that part. I mean, it's a massive overhaul for the Hawks in Dejounte Murray, Justin Holiday, Aaron Holiday, Harkless, Kaminsky, drafted AJ Griffin, and then you send out Herder, Gallo, DeLon Wright, Lou Will, Timothy Luwawu Cabarrot, and I'm still missing a few of the smaller moves as well. Obviously, the headliner is the Dejounte Murray trade. What were your thoughts on the price it took to get Murray, and how do you kind of see the fit with Murray and Trae, and Murray with the Hawks?
I think for the pieces available, I think Dejounte Murray, in theory, was arguably one of the best kind of combo guards we could have put next to Trae Young. So full stop right there. I think he's arguably one of the best kind of two-way guards in the league. And it's a shame that he played in San Antonio just because, you know, they don't have that much national exposure. And a lot of people don't realize how good Dejounte Murray is. But no, I was ecstatic for the trade when the reports first came out that we were trying to get him. It was shocking because, well, no team, no fan thought that Dejounte Murray was even available on the trade block prior to that news break. And so when I saw that my Hawks were gunning for him, this is the first time in a very long time. Or you could actually rewind the clocks back. Oh man. I mean, Dwight Howard wasn't even in his prime, but as far as offseason acquisitions in a trade, this is the first time probably in the last 10, 15 years that the Hawks have actually acquired a all-star guard still in his prime. So two-way player, great facilitator, great in the mid-range, and I think he's going to take a lot of that pressure off when teams try to double or triple team Trey, just because he's such a great ball handler. So I think it was a great move, Jake. As far as the price, you know, some people think it's an overpay, you know, 3 first-round picks, a pick swap, and then Gallinari, of course, coming off the books. And in the market today, I mean, you saw what some of these other players are going for and the asking price for some of these other stars. Now, granted, you could say that Dejounte Murray doesn't merit that type of haul, but when you look at what he can do both on the offensive end and defensive end, I mean, he has all-NBA defense on his resume, led the league in steals last year, you know, averaged damn near a 20-point triple-double, and still got in the play-in the West. So I don't think it's an overpay. I would much have rather gotten the proven player in the NBA versus, you know, holding on to draft picks that you don't even know what they're going to develop into. So I think the move was good, and it was necessary for this team to make that change.
Yeah, the price is high, but that's the price at the moment in the NBA. You see what Rudy Gobert goes for. I mean, it's just outrageous. And I think, well, obviously, like, there's risk to any move when you're moving out even just one draft pick, but especially multiple. But I think you're 100% right. It's worth the risk in this situation. It's an interesting fit, and you never know how it's quite going to work once the ball starts bouncing. But I, in theory, like the fit a lot, and I like what it means for the development of Trey. I mean, Trey Young, he's already proven to be one of the best offensive players in the league, not just one of the best point guards in the league, but one of the best offensive players in the league this early in his career. Like,
absolutely,
man, he is a maestro in the offense. But one piece of the offense that I think's missing, and you can probably speak to this as well, is the off-ball stuff. And you know, the easy comparison with Trey has always been the Steph Curry stuff, and the biggest difference to me has always been the off-ball impact. And I mean, Steph Curry's the best off-ball player of all time. He's so good off-ball that the rest of his game becomes underrated. But what I think this can do for Trey and for the Hawks, yeah, right? What I think this can do for Trey and the Hawks is that it's going to give Trey at least the option to work off ball and develop that skill set. Like, I was looking at some stats that Max at Lismet 14, and just looking at total pick and roll usage last season and points per possession. And Trey wasn't in the top 10, which surprised me because he's that good in the pick and roll. But then you look at the volume of pick and roll. So Bronson was first at 1.056 points per possession, and he only ran 393 pick and rolls, whereas Trey Young's running 1,066. And the next closest player on that list is Luka at 844, who I think would have caught him because Trey, I mean, it would have been closer at least because Trey played 11 more games. But one, I mean, it's good offense. Trey was like just outside the top 10. But when you look at the volume of the pick and rolls and how successful they still are, like, it's great offense. So you run that. But I think bringing in Dejounte, giving Trey now the option and the ability to develop that part of his game can be really good, not just for this season, but I think it's a worthy investment to bring Dejounte in. But an underrated aspect of bringing Dejounte in is the development of Trey Young's overall game. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Jake. And funny enough, and a lot of people don't know this, but Trey has been very vocal about wanting to play more off ball. However, we just haven't had the personnel to actually be able to maximize that. Because when you look at the roster in the Trey Young era, you haven't had many, competent ball handlers outside of Trey. I mean, So when you look at just the roster construction, and when you bring in a player like Dejounte, who's a proven ball handler, I mean, he was top 5 in assists and playmaking last year. So I think that's going to be tremendous. Trey, I think last I saw, he was shooting like 46, 47% from 3 on catch and shoot opportunities. So he's basically money when it comes to, those open looks. And when you bring in someone like Dejounte, I think that's really going to unlock that. And same with Dejounte too, vice versa. And I think the biggest knock with him is, he can do all these great things, but a lot of people like to nitpick on that 3-point percentage. And granted, when you look at Trey's first couple of years in the league, he was shooting mid 32, 33% from 3, not because he was a bad 3-point shooter, but the degree of difficulty and the types of threes that he was taking was all self-created, highly contested threes, because quite frankly, no one else could play make. So I think they're going to help each other tremendously both off ball and developing that part of the game. And I'm excited to see it because Trey definitely wants to do that. And I think this is finally the first season going into year 5 that we'll be able to see that on full display.
Yeah, I think people do get so caught up in that 3-point percentage where they forget about the rest of the game. And Dejounte Murray is someone that doesn't really need to hit threes in order to be incredibly impactful. Like, he does everything. And I think that spurs culture. Similar to what we saw with Derek White, like he couldn't hit a shot for like 3 months. He was still really impactful. All the metrics pointed to him being an impactful player on both ends of the court. And Dejounte Murray is a better player, an all-star version kind of Derek White. And yeah, you can get caught up in the 33% 3-point shot, which, could easily hop up. Still a young player. But everything that he brings to the table on both ends, I think, is really exciting for the Hawks. Now, Murray has been in the news a little bit this week, but going back and forth with Paolo, banging dudes on the head at pickup games. What are our thoughts on Dejounte's offseason so far?
Oh man, I had a feeling you were going to bring that up. So yeah, it's been polarizing, right? Just when you see people on Twitter and social media react, some people love it, some people hate it. They think he's corny, whatever the case may be. Personally, Jake, I love it. I can't get more. I can't ask for more because the Hawks players in the past, we've been missing players like Dejounte that play with that edge, that play with a little bit of tenacity and attitude. And you could even make a case that a lot of our players are quote unquote nice guys, right? So, and I think a lot of opposing teams take advantage of that. And when you look at some of the better teams in the landscape of the NBA, I mean, you guys should know firsthand. You have Marcus Smart and players like that just play with that dog mentality.
Yep.
And I think Dejounte brings that. So I love it, and I can't wait to see him in action in the regular season.
Yeah, look, it's a peak off-season topic, that's for sure. And that's the first thing that popped into my mind was Marcus Smart. Like, you just need a guy on your team like that that's going to fire everybody up and bring people up to his level. And Marcus Smart's been doing that for the Celtics for 10 years almost now. So, yeah, I like it. I like a little bit of pettiness. And look, is Dejounte putting a target on his back for the Magic? Maybe, but I don't think the Hawks are too worried about the big bad Orlando Magic coming to get them this next season.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. We definitely have our sights a little higher than the Orlando Magic. No disrespect to them. I think they're going to be a good competitive young team in the future, but not worried about them right now.
Exactly. All right. Now moving on to maybe the next biggest move for the Hawks in the offseason, the Kevin Huerter trade. Huerter for Mo Harkless, Justin Holiday, and a protected first-round pick. Look, I was always been a big Red Velvet guy, and I can imagine that it was another polarizing move for the Hawks. Anytime you draft a player that turns into a legitimately quality starter in the NBA, it's going to hurt to lose that player just because you form that emotional attachment. So I don't know, what's the vibe on this one?
Yeah, I hate to see Red Velvet leave, and it's funny, I know a couple of Celtics fans wanted Kevin Huerter too, and you guys like him up there, but he's a 6'7" versatile wing, athletic, can shoot from 3, and he was definitely a big piece to this team, and I was hoping we could hold on to him. Because when you look at it just in a vacuum, Kevin Huerter is definitely better than Justin Holiday or Aaron Holiday or Mo Harkless, respectively. But I think it was a move, to shed some salary, but also to bring in more defensive pieces, right? Because the one knock on Kevin Huerter is he can have moments where he plays really good defense, and then most of the time though he's getting beat or he's a little weak when it comes to his frame. Even though he's tall and athletic, he's a little bit too skinny sometimes to play that 3 slot. So really, it's really playing that shooting guard position, and we definitely are going to miss his spacing and missing his scoring ability. But I think it was a move necessary just because of how bad we were defensively last year, and when you bring in the Holiday brothers, who definitely add a little bit extra on the defensive end, especially Justin Holiday, I think it's going to mesh well with the players that we do have on the offensive end to kind of counteract Kevin Huerter's 12, 13 points that we're going to miss. Yeah,
exactly. I think the Hawks can, they can stand to lose a little bit on offense. I mean, they were second in offense last season. Like that's seriously impressive. But as you said, they were 26th in defensive rating last season. So you send out Huerter, and we'll get to Gallo in a sec. But you bring in Mo Harkless, Holiday, and Dejounte, all defensive upgrades. And I think, we've already talked about how great Trey is offensively. I think when you've got Trey on your team, we're going to see a little bit this year. But I think the floor kind of feels like top 10 offense when you've got a guy like that orchestrating your offense. So I think you can stand to lose a little bit offensively when you're bringing in some defensive upgrades. So Gallo, another offensive piece that went out last season, obviously coming to the Celtics on the mid-level exception on a 2-year deal. So what's the scouting report on Gallo? What can we expect from the big Italian at this point in his career?
Oh man, it was tough to see Gallo, leave us. The Italian stallion rooster. He, it was pretty much, it was inevitable, Jake, that he wasn't going to play his final year of the contract, and this was pretty much, a telltale sign even when we first signed him. But the scouting report, first and foremost, he's still one of the best scoring big men coming off the bench in the league, in my opinion, and he's still a serviceable, even starting forward in this league, just because he's just that good of a shooter. He's great in the mid to low post. But my favorite quality about Gallo is his ability to get to the line. That's a very underrated aspect of his game. And, he does this move where he pump fakes, 2 or 3 times to get his defender in the air, and then he'll just kind of throw his big body in there, and usually converts an and one opportunity. But at the least he's getting to the line. So he was honestly probably our best post scorer the past 2 years, our best option in the post. Just feed him and see what he can do. And you guys are Celtics fans. You obviously saw that one game last year when he lit y'all up for 10 threes at the franchise record. So he can still have moments like that. And he had some big moments for us in the playoffs when we made the Eastern Conference Finals. And he's just a certified professional scorer. Now, with that said, he is one big.
No, stop! Don't keep going. Don't keep going.
No, he's great offensively, can space the floor and get to the free throw line, but he's a turnstile on defense, unfortunately, and that's why sometimes we couldn't play him in certain lineups just because he would just get consistently beat, and even when a perimeter player would get beat initially, he has absolutely zero rim protection. He's not even going to contest at the rim. So if Gallo's your last line of defense and you have a player driving to the rim, he's not even going to jump. So be prepared for that. And he's going to get burnt a lot on the defensive end, but I think he makes up for it with his scoring and shooting ability.
Yeah, well, look, we're definitely clipping the first half of that. There's absolutely no question. We love to hear all of that. And I think that's what we expect, right? I mean, fuck. Brad Stevens saw Gallo hit 10 threes and he was like, we got to get this guy in here. But yeah, I think that's what he does. That's what he's always done. He's going to be a little bit of a scoring punch off the bench that can help lighten the load a little bit scoring wise for the Jays. And defensively, anyone that's coming in on the mid-level, not going to be a perfect player. and defensively is obviously where those flaws lie. But when you bring him into a team like the Celtics, that's just loaded with defensive talent. You know, you can run lineups where he's the only bad defender on the court and everybody else can kind of cover for him. So I think a combination of not having to play him too much, and then surrounding him with legitimate defensive talent will kind of balance that kind of stuff out. But having legitimate bench scoring off the bench for the Celtics was an issue for them last offseason, last playoffs. So very exciting for the Celtics. Overall offseason grade for the Hawks. What are you thinking?
I mean, I kind of have to say this just because, as I alluded to earlier, Jake, I mean, we haven't acquired a all-star player, you know, in his prime, going into his prime in over a decade, maybe 2 decades. So because of that move, it kind of shows the new regime and the leadership in Atlanta that, you know, we're willing to push the chips into the table. And because of that, I have to respect it. And we've been begging for another all-star to pair next to Trey. So because of that, I'll give it a modest A-.
Love it. Okay, good. That's a nice balance. You know, not too homery, not A+. Fair grade. Yeah, look, I really like the offseason. As I was kind of doing some prep for the podcast, the more I was kind of diving into it, the more it made sense to me. I'll give him a A- as well. Just so I don't have any Hawks fans coming after me too hard after this one. But you know, great off season. But what are the expectations, I guess, going into the next season? The over/under for the Hawks is 47.5. That's the 5th highest over/under total in the Eastern Conference, ahead of Chicago, Toronto, and Cleveland, who I think a lot of people probably have those teams kind of in a tier together. So what are the expectations going into next season?
Yeah, I was very impressed and surprised with that line when it first came out, and I think that's really on the money there, Jake. 47 wins. I think it's tough to predict just because the East is so good this year, as you know, and it's going to be tough, you know, even teams getting 50+ wins. I think the expectation for us, though, when you look at kind of the people that we brought in and, you know, Trae Young and a lot of these guys that we've drafted, you know, finally going into closer to their prime years. And in my opinion, I think we have the best backcourt in the Eastern Conference with those 2 stars. So with that, I'd say the expectation is at least a top 6 seed and avoid the play-in. That if we got anything under a 6 seed, I think that would be disappointing in my opinion. It's going to be tough getting a top 3 or 4 seed, but I could definitely see 5 or 6 going into this season.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that 4th seed is potentially up for grabs. You know, I don't love doubting Miami, but I haven't loved their off season. But yeah, I think this is a good spot for Atlanta, and something that I think I'm sure Hawks fans have been all over this off season that's probably flying a little bit under the radar, and something that I've been talking about for the Celtics is they have a lot of young players, and young players get better. DeAndre Hunter and Onyeka Okongwu, I'm expecting big years from them. I feel like Hunter and Onyeka have had kind of tough starts injury-wise to their careers and then playing time, things like that. So I could see big years for those guys, and especially Hunter, who I really like, and some people see being able to take like legitimate steps as like a wing creator as well. If you get big steps from those guys, I think that's where the ceiling comes in. And then the floor side of things is I'm just interested to see defensively how they're able to improve. Like obviously they've brought in a lot of these pieces. I think that's going to be the biggest question for me is how much better can they get on defense. But maybe what do you think about Hunter and Onyeka coming into next year?
Oh man, you're speaking my language, Jake. I'm a big. I'm very high on DeAndre Hunter and Onyeka Okongwu going into this season, and like you said, this is the first fully healthy offseason that DeAndre Hunter has had in his NBA career. He dealt with injury in his rookie year, then he had the COVID season, and then he was coming off a knee surgery last year. So this is the first fully healthy offseason, and that's partly why we haven't come to an extension with him, because this is the last year of his rookie deal. But you know, when you look at the landscape of the league, every good team, elite team has, a very good, kind of wing player, right? That three small forward position. And DeAndre Hunter has shown lots of flashes, especially in his sophomore season. Before his injury, there was a stretch of 18 games in his second year where he was arguably our best player, including Trae Young. He shot, the second best mid-range shooting percentage, only behind KD before that injury. But I have really high hopes, man. And I think DeAndre Hunter is the X factor going into this season. If he can really take that big leap and, and I don't want to say he needs to be as good as, see a Jaylen Brown type of improvement, but if we can get slightly under that, if he can just be an above average three where he's, good defensively. And I think bringing in Dejounte Murray is going to help a lot of that because DeAndre was forced to guard the opposition's best perimeter player. That took a lot from his offense. But when you have Dejounte now, he can, be our best POA defender on the perimeter. DeAndre can kind of lessen that workload and really focus on the offensive end. I think that's going to be huge for him. I think if we see 18 to 19 points per game from DeAndre on good efficiency and good defense, I think that's really going to take this Hawks team to that next upper echelon of elite Eastern Conference team. So I have high hopes for him. Onyeka Okongwu, he's obviously he's a little undersized. He's at 6'9" as a center in the NBA, but he's so good defensively with his versatility and being able to switch multiple positions. He could guard 2 through 5. And you saw a glimpse of him in that Eastern Conference run where he was shutting down, Joel Embiid and even Giannis at sometimes. It was beautiful to see. So I think they're both going to have massive years this year. And Onyeka's actually even working on his mid-range and three-point game. And it's funny, in his press conference at the very end of the season when we lost to the Heat, he came back and he told us, next season we're going to see him with the jump shot. So I'm seeing if that actually materializes and how good that can improve. But if he can develop a consistent kind of 15 to 18 foot mid-range shot, I think that's going to make him even better. Because I think he has potential to be, all NBA level defense right now. It's his offense that we need to see a little bit improvement on. But I'm excited for both of them. If they can take big leaps next year, I think this team could sniff, a top 3-4 seed for sure.
Man, this is why I love having on the experts. Those mid-range nuggets for DeAndre and the Onyeka nuggets as well. And so when Celtics fans, when we play the Hawks next year, and DeAndre Hunter and Onyeka are playing incredibly well, and we're like, are you seeing tweets where these guys having the game of their lives against the Celtics, yada yada? It's like, nope. Hawks fans saw this coming. These guys are locked in, and it was expected. Because
yes, sir. Yes,
often
sir.
you play a random team you're not locked in on, and some guy goes off, and you're like, this is what this guy does. This is what this guy does. Alrighty, switching gears a little bit here. Putting on your little Celtics hat. What did you think of the C's run to the finals last year? Any surprises for you throughout that run? Who impressed you? Anything like that?
Yeah. It's funny because the Celtics and the Hawks, we dealt with the same frustration because I know a lot of Celtics fans knew you guys had a lot of potential, but you guys were hovering around that 500 mark for the longest time. And then there's something that shifted and you guys just went on a crazy tear in the second half of the season. It was a little surprising to see that type of run. Quite honestly, I underestimated a few of your players, mainly Marcus Smart. I'm no longer a Marcus Smart doubter, even though I hate the guy still. Don't get me wrong, I hate the guy. I would love him on my team. But no, he really proved to me that no, he deserves to be in this league. But no, the Celtics are a good team, and like you said, I think it starts on the defensive end when you have players like Marcus Smart and Jaylen Brown and Robert Williams, and you brought in Derek White, who I was advocating the Hawks should trade for last trade deadline. It's funny that we now got Dejounte Murray, but and then Jason Tatum. So you guys have a lot of good defensive pieces, but then Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown kind of taking that leap as well. It was surprising, but I think where you guys are at now, I think this should be kind of the norm for y'all moving forward. Granted that these guys stick together and you see no setbacks, but I think the Celtics for the next 5-6 years are going to be right at the top of the Eastern Conference. I would not be surprised by that. Now, of course, we have to see what happens because not all progression is linear, and maybe the finals run was a little bit fluky, but I don't think it was. But I think the Celtics are definitely going to be, a top 2-3 seed. 3 seed, I think, is like the last, like furthest I would go. But I think a top 1 or 2 seed is more realistic for you guys. And I'm excited to see what you guys do. It's I'm hoping if our Hawks can improve and we'll see some of these other players develop, I'm hoping we can kind of reignite that rivalry that we've had in the past. And it'll be a fun series going forward just because a lot of your best players are relatively the same age as a lot of our best players, and it'll be an exciting matchup, for years to come.
Yeah, it's been a fun matchup in the regular season the last couple of years. We haven't been able to match up in the playoffs quite yet, but I think it's coming. Look, the turnaround, man. Like watching some of the Hawks games, and I was watching some of the Celtics versus the Cavs games from earlier in the year, and it's hard to believe that they're the same season, and how much I've kind of compartmentalized anything that happened before, like 2022, because reliving some of that stuff was like PTSD. And it's crazy how something can just click with a team, and then you're off to the races. So what did you think of the off-season additions of Brogdon? And we already touched on Gallo, but I guess Brogdon. Yeah,
I mean, if Brogdon stays healthy, I think that's going to be a huge acquisition. And remind me, Jake, who was y'all's starting back? Was it Marcus Smart and Jaylen Brown? Was that the lineup you guys were running?
Marcus. Yeah, correct. So Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown. I was going to pull you up on it earlier, Dejounte and Trey being the best backcourt in the league, but you're a guest. We'll say it's tied first for now.
Yeah. So when you bring in that, and then was it Jason Tatum at the 3, and then Al Horford at the 4, and then Robert Williams at the 5? Was that your main go-to lineup?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, when you bring in someone like Brogdon, it's going to be interesting to see because, personally, I think a healthy Malcolm Brogdon is, it's tough because he's also, people forget he's really good defensively too. He's really good defensively, and he's just been battling injuries, and he's one of the few players that has a 50, 40, 90 season under his belt. So I am actually very high on Malcolm Brogdon, and I think he's a much better player offensively than Marcus Smart. So I could see scenarios where you guys run, Smart and Brogdon at the 1 and 2, and then Jaylen at the 3, Tatum at the 4, and then whoever at the 5, and that's a really good 1 through 4 lineup. It's going to be scary. I mean, if Malcolm Brogdon stays healthy and he can kind of go back to what he's done in the past, when he was on the Pacers and things like that, I think you guys have definitely improved just by adding that. But the big question mark is his health. He hasn't been able to stay healthy for a long time, so even without that, let's just pretend Malcolm Brogdon did get hurt or he was never on the team. I think you guys are still good enough, with the core guys that you have to still be competitive in the East. So, but no, Gallinari, Brogdon, I think it was a good move, and I would give you, you guys made really good offseason acquisitions. It's you can't hate on that.
Yeah. I think obviously the big question with Brogdon is the injury stuff, obviously, but I think bringing him in as I've been banging the table. If you want to make some money this season, Malcolm Brogdon for 6th man of the year is sitting there at 15-1. But yeah, you limit his minutes. You try and get him back to what he was doing in Milwaukee, where he was playing some more games. You just keep those minutes down, and you try and preserve him for the playoffs. But yeah, that's the lineup that I'm very excited for because Derek White, Marcus Smart, Jaylen, Jason, and one of Al Horford or Rob was really good. But the only downside to that was Derek White's offense kind of comes and goes versus you replace him with Malcolm Brogdon, one of a much better offensive player. You're pretty elite on both ends of the court. So that lineup I think has the potential to be pretty deadly. Alrighty, yeah, looking ahead to next season. Let's say the Celtics are the 2 seed. The Hawks have a big year and they make it to the 3 seed. It's a second round. We finally get the series that we've been talking about. how are we thinking this goes? What are we thinking the matchups? We got the two best backcourts in the league, in the East going at it. What do you reckon?
Yeah, that's going to be an exciting matchup. I think hell, if we're a top 3 seed, that obviously means that DeAndre Hunter took a really big leap, or Trey and Dejounte just went crazy and are averaging 30 points each a game. So, but I think the former is a lot more realistic. I think as far as matchups go, you would put Trey on Marcus Smart, Dejounte Murray probably on Jaylen Brown, and then you would put DeAndre, of course, on Tatum. John Collins would be on Al Horford, and then Clint Capella on Robert Williams. It's interesting. So when you look at the backcourt scenario, and no disrespect to Marcus Smart or Jaylen Brown, I think out of the 4, Trey, DeJounte, Marcus, and Jaylen, I think there's one player that's tiers above all 4 of them, and that's of course Trae Young, the All NBA player. So I think he's significantly better, in my opinion, than any of those other 3 players. And I think you could, DeJounte, Smart, and Jaylen, I think are roughly kind of in that same tier almost. I think that backcourt would be leaning more towards Trae Young and DeJounte Murray, in my opinion. I think they're the more talented group out of that 4. So I would give a slight edge in the backcourt to the Trae Young and DeJounte Murray squad. And then obviously Jason Tatum is better than DeAndre Hunter. So that's a clear, win for you guys at the 3. And then when you look at the front court, Al Horford he had an outer body experience last year, in my opinion. Because Al Horford we drafted him. He played most of his career in Atlanta, and I was a big Al Horford fan, so I watched a lot of his games. And with his age, I just don't know if he's gonna be able to replicate what he did last year again. But who knows? Maybe he does. And then Robert Williams. You could argue. A healthy Clint Capella, who a lot of people forget before his injury, he was a top 5 defensive player of the year candidate, led the league in blocks and rebounds that year that we made the Eastern Conference Finals, and it was really the anchor and rim protector that this team needed. So I think, that could be a wash. And I think when you look at someone like John Collins, who's a efficient, 18 point per game, 8-9 rebound a game on really good efficiency, you could even argue, John Collins and Clint Capella is a better front court than, Al Horford and Robert Williams.
Okay, here we go.
I wouldn't. But I'll defer to you, Jake. We'll go. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah. I think similar to the Hawks in the sense that DeAndre Hunter is kind of the X factor for the Hawks. I would say Robert Williams is the X factor for the Celtics. And last year was kind of his breakout year, obviously, where he played big minutes, and he was on all defensive team, and it was really just his first year playing like legitimate minutes for a quality team, and his impact is kind of absurd. Like when you look at the numbers on off with Rob Williams, when healthy, he's an absolute monster. And so coming into next season with an off season under his belt, able to go in there and work on a bit more of his offensive game, get the floater game going, things like that. That's someone who I would caution for other teams when going up against the Celtics to not underestimate, because he kind of does stuff that a lot of other humans and NBA players can't do. Yeah, I think it would be a fun matchup for sure. Like Trae Young versus Marcus Smart for 7 games or however many games the series goes would just be. We're gonna. There's gonna be some hate coming out of Twitter during that one. Absolutely, no question. Like Trae, just absolute wizard going against a defensive player of the year. I think is a clash of the titans on 2 ends of the floor. Trae obviously quite flawed defensively, and Marcus has his limitations on offense as well. So I think that would be a really fun battle. I do have a question on Trae. As far as the defensive limitation stuff, and watching Steph Curry in the finals, his defensive ability has gotten better and better as his career has gone along. And I think that's probably when you look at the playoffs where I start to just feel a little bit of pause for the Hawks. Just when you have a weak link quite like that on your starting lineup or as your best player. What are your thoughts on Trey and his defense and how that fits into winning kind of at the highest level?
Yeah, it's no secret that Trey is definitely has his deficiencies on the defensive end, and being a 6'1", 160-pound player in the NBA that's tough to defend. A lot of these bigger, stronger guys, and that's obviously his number one knock is the defensive liability. And now, as far as, getting steals and, poaching the passing lanes, I think he's pretty solid at that. But when it comes to just off-ball defense and, on-ball defense, it's, he does tend to get beat quite a bit. And, part of that is effort. Part of that is just his size. But I think it really boils down to the willingness to want to play defense. And, as you mentioned, the Steph Curry thing, his first few years into the league, he was not good defensively. At least he was nowhere near the defender that he is now at his age. And I think Trey can kind of use that similar path and mold, as he gets older. And, people forget he's only 23 years old. So he's still a child, in my opinion. So as he matures and builds out his frame more and adds more muscle, I think it's going to bode well for him. And especially when you add a player like Dejounte to bring in that defensive first mentality, but also when you bring in Dejounte, now Trey can focus on not having to dribble the ball, all 4 quarters of the game, not having to make plays for his teammates and exert all of his energy on the offensive end. So he's going to be able to, reserve a lot of that stamina on the defensive end now that we have Dejounte. So I think that's going to help tremendously as well. But yeah, I mean, he's got to improve on the defensive end, Jake. There's no sugarcoating it. And I think he knows it too, and he sees the tweets. He's very active on social media. People like to knock him for his defense. So I think hopefully he turns that corner and improves defensively. I don't need him to be an all-NBA defender, but I need him to be at least a average defender in order for us to really take that leap. But it's similar to kind of the Gallo thing. It's if you can surround him with 4 other above average defenders and Dejounte, DeAndre, Clint, and JC or whoever we put at the 4, I think that's going to help him out and this team out a lot too. So if he's the only weak defender, I think we can get by with it just because of what he brings offensively, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think this year is going to be very informative from that perspective because, as we already touched on, you sent out Herter and Gallo, whose knocks are defense. And when you have 3 guys that are playing 25 plus minutes that are all negatives on the defensive end, that it's going to look worse for someone like Trey and for someone like Trey where people like any superstar. That's the day we live in. Any glaring issue in their game. I mean, I've been on Twitter for 6 weeks now defending my boy Tatum for his subpar finals. Any superstar that has something that people can go after, they're going to go after it. And so I think this is going to be a year that Trae Young is going to have the opportunity to kind of prove some of those doubters wrong and see what it looks like on the defensive end. All right, we're coming towards the end here. A bit of fun that we're going to do as part of this series is the Shadenfruede rankings. So for any listeners that don't know what Shadenfruede is, it's basically when someone that you hate or dislike, sports hate. No, we don't hate anyone. Sports hate, when bad things happen to them, it makes you feel good. For example, Celtics fans watching the Lakers and this Russell Westbrook experience has brought us a lot of joy. And it was probably the main thing that got me through the first half of the NBA season. And I think that's part of NBA fandom now, is not just loving your team, but kind of getting shots off at other teams as well. So where do this, and I know the Celtics aren't everybody's favorite team. So where does Celtics rank, do you think, on Hawks fans' Schadenfreude list, and how does that all work for Hawks fans?
Oh, man. I can't speak for every Hawks fan, but I can say that a good majority of Hawks fans don't like Boston Celtics fans, or just the Celtics in general. And especially if you're a little bit younger, Even dating back to that '08 series where we took the Celtics to 7 games, I think that's where it really started. And, the whole KG and Zaza Pachulia beef. I mean, it was great to watch. I went to 2 of those home games live. And,
amazing.
At the time, it was incredible.
That's awesome.
For me, I mean, the Celtics are definitely high up there. I also take a lot of joy in seeing just Raptors and Raptor fans just get embarrassed. So, but I think for me, you mentioned that example, right? You love when a certain player does really bad or something bad happens to him. And don't hate me for this, Jake, but I will say I took a lot of enjoyment watching Andrew Wiggins, take care of Jason Tatum in that final series. That was quite brutal on that front.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, man, you
knew I was going
to. Hey, look, if Jason's gonna cop it, I'm willing to take it too. If you're gonna dish it, you got to be willing to take it. And something that I love about Tatum is that he's taken it on the chin this season, and so that's very understandable. I'm glad you have the same experience with Raptors fans. Until I kind of hopped on Twitter, I kind of really got on Twitter the last couple of years, and that really exposed me to the Raptors online culture. I have no idea what it's kind of like more broadly, but they have a very intense online presence, and we experienced that after off a back-to-back. Celtics went up to Toronto and didn't bring Jalen, Jason, Horford, probably missing someone else, and Aaron Nesmith and Peyton Pritchard took them to overtime, and Raptors fans flooded every mention, every YouTube comment about how they're coming for us in the playoffs, and I find that they can be pretty toxic. So I do enjoy them losing because of their fans, but I kind of actually like a few of their players. So that's kind of a tricky balance for me. As you said, I can't speak for all Celtics fans, but for me personally, it's like, Lakers, if they're in the West, they're kind of always going to be number one. But for the Eastern Conference, it's Philly in a tier all by themselves. I love when bad things happen to them, and watching the Hawks take their soul last 2 years ago in the playoffs, honestly, one of my favorite sporting moments. Honestly, like, I'll never forget, I was watching on League Pass, and was it game 5 in Philly? I forget which game it was in Philly, but it was the big comeback, and it was silence, and all I could hear was the stadium DJ playing Apple Bottom Jeans as Trae Young just kind of paraded around the court, and made me really happy.
Yeah, that was a great moment. Joel Embiid is right up there for me in terms of just players that I hate. Of course, like you said, on the basketball court. Actually, no, you know what? I'm not even gonna sugarcoat. I think he's corny. I think he's corny too. It was very fun seeing just that whole process thing, getting shut down to, in round 2. I loved it, but I think Raptors, the fan base, definitely takes the cake for me in the Eastern Conference, just because, and you might call me crazy, Jake, but I think Kawhi basically saved that franchise, right? I mean, before Kawhi, they were consistent, first, second round exits for the entire DeMar DeRozan, Kyle Lowry era. And sure, you could blame that on LeBron James or whatever the case may be, but, no one really were scared of the Raptors, right? Then they managed to pull off that miraculous trade, get Kawhi Leonard, and they won a ring that year. And, Raptors fans are talking like they're some historic franchise that won, 5, 6, 7, 8 different championships, when, quite frankly, historically speaking, they've never really done anything except for that one title run. But I think Kawhi deserves a statue in Toronto. I think he's the greatest Raptor of all time, and every Toronto resident should be bowing down to Kawhi Leonard for that gift that he gave them.
Yeah. No, there's no question. They were LeBronto until Kawhi came in and saved them. This is good. We're going to do some good market research here with our guests, and when I have a Raptors fan on, I can present to them the results of the other teams and how everybody is feeling about them, and see what they have to say about it. So I'm glad episode 1 we're on the same page with that. Getting towards the end, just quick thoughts. I'm asking everybody that comes on this, do you think the Celtics should trade for Kevin Durant?
No. I mean, if I'm a Celtics fan, I don't think I pull that trade, especially if the package is for, Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, and, numerous picks. Now, if it was a prime KD, then absolutely. I think you can match him up with Tatum, and I think that's a no-brainer. But I think one of the reasons what makes your team so good is that the depth and the versatility that Jaylen Brown and Marcus Smart and players like that bring. And I think you guys would actually get worse if you did make that trade. Now, for me, I would love if you made that trade. Go ahead, ship off Jaylen Brown and ship off Smart and all that. And I think it's going to be funny. But no, from a Celtics perspective, I don't think you guys should make that trade.
Great. This is good. See, this is why we have other people on. See, Hawks fans they want us to make the trade because it's going to make us worse. I would say, well, this podcast in particular, everybody here is in camp. Don't trade Jaylen for KD. So I'm glad we're on the same page with that one. Any final thoughts going into next season?
Don't be surprised. Trae Young, top 5 MVP candidate going into next season by season's end. That's my hot take for this show, Jake.
Okay, I mean, I like it. I mean, Devin Booker was up there last year. I mean, look. And we spoke about if they can kind of be a more average defensive team, I think that's going to make it a lot easier for him to get into the conversation and just how good he is offensively. Yeah, no, wouldn't surprise me. I like that. I might have to check out the odds on that one. Well, Alex, I mean, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. Anything to plug? I know follow Alex at Hawks Fan TV on Twitter. Check out the website. All the great content they have there. But anything else you guys got going into next season?
Yeah, no, really appreciate you for having me on. As you mentioned, you can check out all of our socials at HawksFan TV on Twitter and Instagram and YouTube, and check out HawksFanTV.com for all your latest kind of Hawks content and stories that we do. And just to answer your question, Jake, Trae is number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 10. 12 right now as far as MVP odds go. He's at plus 4,000 and right behind Devin Booker and LeBron James.
Hey, look, anytime there's a 40-1 that seems relatively possible, you got to think about it. But yeah, thanks so much, Alex. Appreciate having you on, and it's good to get the Hawks perspective, and I wish you luck going into next year.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's hope and pray that both of our guys can stay healthy this season. So it's going to be a fun season. I can't wait. And I expect the Celtics to be competitive. Hopefully our Hawks can be right up there too.
Awesome. Well, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Celtics Reddit podcast. Talk to you soon. Peace.